I started Motion Moms in 2010, not quite 2 years after the inception of the App Store. And it's so strange to think about how different that time period is. It
Yeah.
wasn't that long ago, although 13 years is a long time. But just to think about how much technology has changed in general, I mean, the majority of the first conversations that we had cannot call them optimistic, where people are like, you think people are going to use their phones to pay their bills? What are you talking about? And I mean, very successful executives of huge companies were like, people are simply not going to use their phones to pay their bills. Maybe kids will play games, but we're not investing in this. I just thought it was fascinating that, people would put, for example, games on the App Store when the App Store first came out, and there was just an absurd number of downloads because there was such little content compared to how many people were on their phones and using their phones. I think Starbucks was a company that we looked at really early and followed because they took a really interesting approach. I think, without looking it up, I think it was January 2011 that Starbucks announced we're going to outfit all of our locations with new hardware. And they didn't call it this at the time, but what they did is they introduced a consumer wallet. I would say the first of its kind. They were like, we have this code and we're going to assign it to you and we'll have your coffee ready when it comes out. And at first there were some hiccups, right? Like it was probably faster to go to a Starbucks and just order your coffee than order it online at the time,
Really?
but they worked through it and it was a phenomenal thing. And like their stock prices just kept going up. And this technology ended up being an incredible thing for them. And everyone was like, why is Starbucks growing so quickly? Even during like bad times in the economy, Starbucks was still growing. And it was just so much easier to have like complicated orders that you could place in line and you could just run in and grab your coffee quickly. Or even if it wasn't faster, the perception that it was going to be faster or that you could pick it up and not have to stand through a line was so exciting. And so that was a story that we followed really early on. And we were just like, yeah, I really want to be involved in this, as far as I want to be involved in kind of this mobile landscape, how companies start thinking about mobile. And it was exciting to watch the change where people went, oh, maybe people are going to spend more time on their phones. And so it's been an interesting evolution in our company from then until now. But it was certainly interesting to see which companies like dove in really quickly and which companies were really hesitant or even dismissive. Well, of course, people aren't going to
Yeah.
do that.
You know what is crazy when you said 2010 in the App Store, and like you said, it doesn't feel that long ago. You're like, that wasn't even a thing. And by the way, when I was looking up on my phone, I usually do this beforehand, but 2010, the number one song, and this is kind of weird, was Kesha, TikTok. So now you can go back and be like, this is what was hot when we started this whole journey. And what's funny is she spells it like TikTok, which I had no idea that that was a thing either. So she was way ahead of her time.
Way
We
ahead,
didn't know
very
this,
much so.
but yeah, we might have to look into that.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I digress. Continue.
Then obviously as more companies picked up and said, this is something we're really interested in, we were really invested in helping companies establish a mobile strategy and really like just answering basic questions of why are you pursuing customers that are on the go when companies are on their phone and they're thinking about your brand and they're using it, like what do you want them to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And so thinking about e-commerce or payment transactions at the time, I'm trying to think, we have integrated with a lot of payment providers over the years. So I'm trying to think of who was some of the first payment providers we integrated with. I remember some of the first applications that we did where we integrated through the App Store's payments. And that was something we spent a lot of time educating on, especially then, but even some still today, is that I always give the example because I just think it's so relatable to everyone of Hulu and Netflix. If you think about it, like on your mobile devices, you have Hulu and Netflix on your device, but you cannot purchase a subscription and you can't even like update your card to change your subscription. And so if you have, for example, a Hulu plan without ads and then you decide like, okay, maybe I'm okay with ads, and you want to change your plan subscription, you can't do it on any of their mobile apps. You have to go on your computer and on your browser to update your credit card information. And the reason it's that way is because otherwise they would be paying a percentage to Apple and Android to integrate with their subscription based service, and the payments wouldn't work. And so there was a lot of different integrations and tech companies that we really have a lot of expertise in, just because you had to have those payment integrations to really make that work. And so
Yeah.
that's something that we did a deep dive in early on. And still, there's just a lot of nuances to payments. We've been working on a project recently that probably has more payment integrations than any project we've ever worked with before. And there were just some unique challenges, like their target market needed a lot of different payment solutions. And it's been a lot of just what's the right fit for this, who integrates well, and how does that impact the
You go.
company and the business to do those integrations.
Payments have been a really interesting place for innovation over these past 10, 12 years for a lot of the reasons Taylor was saying, in that when and Google made changes to, you have to only have a premium download or a free download, versus now we're offering subscriptions. Now you can implement your own payment processing. You can start introducing all these different methods. You can advertise in apps. One of the things that we have always had to stay very in front of is helping our clients figure out what revenue model makes the most sense for the software that they're developing. Because there's always something new, the rules are changing, what you're allowed to do versus where you're going to have to pay fees. It's something that a lot of people who even now are still new to this space can't really wrap their head around all of the options that are out there. And it's actually a really great opportunity to be creative and to dig into, how can we optimize the value that you're offering your customers in a way that that payment model makes sense for your business. And so even now, like with the product that Taylor was talking about, that's one of the most complicated payment models that we've ever implemented. And it's just because we wanted to give users the choice as to how they want to pay.
I think I heard something recently that if because Apple wants 30% or a percentage of whatever it is, that if you try to pay through an app versus going on to a desktop, that the prices are going to be typically different.
It really that certainly could be true, and it is true that it's 30%. It's the same for both Apple and for Android or Google Play, but they're trying to fit. Apple and Google are handling the payments, and even refunds are processed through them. So for them to say, like, we're providing the store, we're giving you our payment processor, and we're actually like operationally managing it, I understand why reasonably there's a percentage associated with that. You just run into this issue of, well, every business isn't one size fits all. And so how do you fit it into the right box to make it work and to kind of explain that? If you are downloading for example, a game, and you're making in-app purchases in the game, there's really no way around that. You're going to pay Apple and Google about 30% for those in-app purchases. And for that matter, for anything that is a true in-app purchase, you're going to pay that percentage. Um, but it's overused. But like I said, I just think it's so common. I think Hulu and Netflix have done a great job of, like, if you see an ad on any social network and you click on that ad, it's going to take you to purchase on their website, even if you're on their mobile phone. They're just going to take you to a mobile friendly landing page for that ad that takes you into the payment processing. And so there are several people that are like, no, you can get on the app and you can pay. And I'm like, no, you can certainly do it on your phone. And it's very mobile friendly. And you can tell they've spent an enormous amount of time on how that's set up. But you just can't purchase it as an in app purchase or set it up as a subscription through the app.
By the way, have y'all built any games?
We have, but it's been a while. We haven't built any games recently.
Do you think that the decision about how to manage payments is probably one of the bigger decisions that people have to make when it comes to the business model, or is this typically an afterthought? Like, how big of a choice is this?
I think the revenue model for the project is absolutely one of the most important decisions. Like, even if, for example, there's not a payment happening through the application, because we'll have a lot of companies that will ask us questions to, like, for example, do you think my project should be browser based or do you think it should be a native mobile app? And my answer is always the same, regardless of the company. I'm like, if I don't know them, I'm like, I have no idea. I have no, like, what are you doing? What are you what are you
It's a
trying to
fair
do?
question.
Why are we
Yeah.
here?
Why are we? That's right. Would you say your name was again?
What are you trying to market or sell? Because I mean, there's just reasons behind those decisions and figuring out the best model to it. But a lot of them really boil down to, if it's a marketing metric based decision, then it's okay, well, what data are you trying to collect? If it's a pure sales, like we want to put an e-commerce product together, then obviously for that's actually an exception to the payments rule on Apple and Android. So for example, of course, Amazon does not pay Apple and Google 30% every time they sell paper towels. So for physical goods, you can put any e-commerce store on the App Store, and if you're selling physical goods, there's an exception where you're not paying that percentage, which also means you have to have your own payment processor.
By the way, so this gives me a chance to throw this in there, which is, it's like somebody comes to you and says, I'm hungry, and you're like, the country, or you need food, and then what are we talking about here? Like, let's start with allergies. Is there anything that'll kill you?
You're exactly right. Ultimately, there are so many different nuances into, are you selling a physical service or is it a digital service? Are you blocking access to certain features? Does your product exist through a mobile app and through a web application? All of those nuances play into, are you going to be making an in app transaction or are you going to have to provide your own payment processor? And there are different expenses that are associated with both of those. Fortunately, recently, both Apple and Google introduced a small business program. And so, as long as you are transacting under $1 million per year through those in app purchase mechanisms, it's only 15%. But as soon as you hit that $1 million mark, then it jumps up to that 30%. Historically, it was 30%. And it was after significant pressure from developers that both companies ultimately dropped their percentage to make it more friendly to small businesses. But there's just so much that goes into, what is it that your business is offering to users through a piece of technology?
This is such a perfect discussion based on the theme of being optimistic about something. Like you're like, I have this idea, I'm going to put it on an app, it's going to kick ass, and that's all anybody needs to know. And you're like, actually, we have questions.
It's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, like, there's way more things that you have to decide outside of, I'm solving this problem, somebody's got to code this thing, and I'm going to make millions. Because that's how it starts.
Yeah. One of the conversations that I enjoy the most is we've had several clients recently that will say, like, we have a division of our business or an aspect of our business where our customers are really consistently telling us that they want this particular thing. Um, and either we've never offered it to them before, or we do offer it to them, but it's incredibly manual. And it's like, you have a client base, you obviously know your industry very well, and you have something that's either extremely like time and labor intensive to get done and therefore like difficult on the business. Or you've never offered it before, but all of your customers are requesting that you offer it, or at least in that aspect of your business. Those projects are very exciting because you get to work with people who really understand their industry and really understand their customers and may not be in technology at all, and it can even be intimidating to them. They're like, "No, I don't know anything about apps or I don't know anything about software, but here's what we need to do." And I'm like, yeah, no, this is perfect. You just walked me through step by step everything that like your customer wants to experience through a digital experience. This is amazing.
Do you have a kind of a pre-canned sort of like, if you can answer these 10 questions, then you're on your way to developing an app type of a thing? Or is it...
We do. We have an internal document that we use just internally that's just a really and we, we communicate the same thing to clients and prospective clients that's more and it's a lot of what I just said. Do you have expertise in that industry? Why are you or your company the right company to develop it? And what is your revenue model? And if there's no revenue model, what's your metric or goal you're trying to get to or you're trying to accomplish? What do you think your customers or your target market wants out of it? And if they can get through that group of questions and have answers or say, I don't know, but here's what I'm thinking and here's where my head is and here's what I think we need to do to answer that, that gets us really excited about those projects. The interesting thing to me is that, like, I think that that applies whether it's a brand new company, it's a new entrepreneur or a new app idea, or if it's a company, a very large enterprise company, because everyone's still thinking about them as innovation projects. And so it's okay, well, for this particular innovation project experience, why are we doing it? Who's going to use it? What's the goal of it? And how do we make it work and create a good experience?
I like the idea of the innovation projects, right? Um, and I get excited about those things too. I think, you know, our experience has often been that when people do innovate or create something new, that it was way harder and way more expensive than they ever imagined it would be. Just because that it's, again, you feel like I'm going to build this thing and it's going to change everyone's life and I won't be able to stop people from buying it. And you realize that there's way more that goes into it than that. And it's like, this is your life, this is your baby, you got to raise it now every single day, all day long. Like,
Yeah,
you've got to champion the thing. Yeah.
that's
Okay.
absolutely true.
So we got, I think we got to where, everything when we started it to sort of, I think where you are now. What do you guys think about what's the future of what's going to happen moving forward with motion mops?
Well, I think a big the types of technology that we use, the way that we implement technology obviously has changed just with innovations in the market over the years, and we know that that will continue to change. I think the thing that has always been consistent for us is we're big believers in there is a lot of really talented software developers out there. And so, as far as someone saying, hey, how do I find a developer to put this project together? Like, we've been fortunate to work with a lot of really talented developers, but there's a lot of talented developers in Birmingham, in our community, and all over the country and outside of the country. A, a big thing is, I think that if you ask a software developer, if you had 25 different software developers and you gave them the same information and asked them to build the same project, you'd get 25 different answers. And so we're really big believers in, like, what is the plan going into this project? And I've made way too many cheesy comparisons to construction. And so, because it's just so true. It's kind of like you drive up to an empty lot and you're like, hey, can you build me a house on this lot? And every contractor is like, yeah. And then every contractor gives you like vastly different estimates based on what they envision you might want. And so I think really nailing down, this is why we're doing this is what we want, and this is what the plan is for it, is something that we've consistently been about since the beginning and is important to us. And as far as kind of where I see things changing moving forward, I do not I see AI as continuing to be part of the conversation moving forward. I don't think that's going anywhere. I think it's really difficult for businesses to try to figure out the balance of how am I supporting, providing for, and creating a good community for my workforce, but then also balanced with how do I handle these really like labor intensive processes that's just too much for me to really like allocate enough time for my team to do. And so I think we'll keep seeing more and more innovations in AI. And there are already so many, and there's already so many VC backed AI for fill in the blank, but I don't think that's going anywhere. And I think that will continue to be more competitive. And so we're already spending a lot of time working with AI, but I think we'll spend more time, and I think we'll spend more time integrating AI products into our work too. And so that's exciting, and brings up all kinds of fun conversations with, legal departments and HR departments, and how does this work together, and how does this fit into the company, and how do you kind of adapt for using that?
Yeah, it's funny. You brought it up. You brought the AI thing, so I'm not responsible for the conversation that goes from here. But I'm directing this totally at Emily. Like your role in having to deal with AI, because essentially what you've got are these developers or technically minded people that are like, ooh, all these things we can do, and you're pulling the ropes back on everyone, right? And so, what's been your experience with AI so far?
I think because I work with a highly technical team, the response to AI has actually been much more cautious and measured than, let's say, some of the executives at some of our client companies. In where there's this expectation from, the CEO from XYZ company who says, I don't need to hire developers anymore. I'm just going to have Chat GPT write my software. Meanwhile, I have a team of developers over here who are saying, ChatGPT can't write your proprietary product. You need a developer to do that. And so they are most definitely interested in exploring like GitHub Copilot and tools that make them more efficient as developers. But they are not concerned that we are going to replace them with AI because they know the talent that they bring to the table. And I think it's going to be a really interesting next 12 months as we see companies dealing with the ramifications of however they've decided to handle AI. So, those companies who said, I'm going to scale back the tech staff and I'm going to rely on AI to do absolutely everything, it's not going to work out. They're going to come back around and they're going to say, we fell down. It didn't work. Please help us put it back together. We can help you do that.
Yeah.
But my hope is that the developer tools continue to improve so that our team can continue to get more efficient with their time and spend less time, chasing bugs, less time writing very basic pieces of code that they could do again and again by asking an AI assistant to do it for them. Realistically, I would love to get to a place where the AI coding tools are just as valuable as the AI marketing content generation tools are, where you could put in the hands of, a social media marketer, hey, go write a whole bunch of social media posts, and they can use something like ChatGPT to produce content at scale. Would love to see those kinds of tools kind of expand and improve to the point that our developers feel just as maximized when we put those tools in their hands.
I will, from my perspective on that too. Again, you brought it up, not me. Is that it's not? It's sort of like, hey, this is neat. Let's train it to do this, but I don't know how much time it's truly saving, and unless you're trying to do something that's a post every day for 12 months.
It is so susceptible to garbage in, garbage out. And so if you don't have somebody putting something really quality in as a prompt, you're going to get garbage out.
And we have seen way more garbage out, certainly from just not from a social media post perspective, but from a content development perspective. Even the freelance writers, you can see that they're using it and they're overusing it, and
Yes.
it looks and sounds like trash, and you're just kind of like, all right, we got to figure something else out here.
And I mean, the exact same thing is true for nearly every AI tool on the market. We just see it more with content because we're all consuming these platforms for multiple hours per day. But the same is true whether you're using a financial AI bot or if you're using a coding AI bot, you name it, it's only as useful as a really, really intelligent intern that you give fantastic direction to.
To me, I will say for us, it feels like regression to the mean, right? It can only be average. it can't
Yeah.
really, it's not going to, I mean, it can be below average, but I think the ceiling for it right now is it's going to be average. It's going to be good enough to get by if you have to get by. And in some cases, it might be, marginally smarter than that. But from what I've seen so far, y'all might have seen something else where you're like, oh no, this is great. But you see people that are professing that it's, that it wrote code to be able to predict which stocks, are going to win over the next 5 years. And I don't know, I don't know if I see that.
I'm with you. There's a lot of confidence that, news articles put in AI that we have yet to actually see play out in reality.
Now, one thing I might try to get it to do, which I wrote down, which is I want it to make a bunch of memes of the CEOs, what they want AI to do for them. Like, I love this.
Yes,
I see
please do
like
that.
a vest and a cigar, like, go make AI do that. Like, I need memes of this. Yeah, I love this. Okay. Fully supported. Yeah, I mean, I think that's you guys talked about technology, and we obviously AI is creating these situations where it's almost like daily. You don't know what's going to happen, and even with, over the weekend, fired and hired and fired again and rehired over it, open and their whole thing. But what are some of the top taking AI out, which might not even be possible? But what are maybe the technologies that you guys are seeing that you're either implementing or you see right now where you're like, I really want to get involved with this, that are making a difference in y'all's world?
In our world individually or in our world as a company?
Great question. Company first, individually second.
One comment on AI first, sorry. I think though that it's kind of interesting, like when we were starting this conversation as far as themes of companies not really understanding how something works. And so having different expectations than how it played out. And so I'll just quickly say, I don't think AI is different. I think it's the same theme in a way. It's it comes back to the same question of how are you using this? Why are you using it that way? What are your expectations? And how is that going to help your customers or how's that going to help your company? All right. Now, AI aside, um we mentioned payments earlier, and I think it's top of mind for us with some of the projects we're working on right now. As a company, we have used a lot of products or integrated with a lot of products in the fintech space and also built some things on our own that's proprietary tech was really focused on the underbanked. And so, communities that are the most affected going through any recession or economic hardship. And that's been just been very rewarding. Like, there's been a lot of obviously, you have people, and I pause because there's so many challenges and there's so much frustration on their end. And there's a reason that financial literacy is so important, but when you start thinking about using technology products from a market that's wholly underserved, that has very little or any education available to them about those finances, and that are like, "No, I've never had a bank account. I don't know how to use that, and I don't know how to make payments any other way." And all of their payments, for example, for Christmas presents or otherwise, are through prepaid gift cards. And so, like to use one company as an example, Cash App as a company, which is similar to Venmo in some ways, same kind of digital wallet for exchanging cash. They have a Cash App card where you can go into physical stores and load money onto those cards as a means for them to have a card to make digital payments online. And in certain circumstances, that gives them access to things or discounts that they can't otherwise get. And so, if they're trying to buy something at a discounted price online and they need a card to do that with, like kind of using Cash App and seeing how their technology works and learning more about some of their data, how customers are preloading these cards in stores has been a really interesting thing.
What's the percentage of Birmingham that would fall into the underbanked? Like, I've just as a frame of reference, so I would understand like how many people this affects.
I don't know the answer to that question without researching it. I think in our case with this particular project that we're talking about, as with all projects, we're really focused on as consultants, here's the target market that we're looking at, and here's the group that's affected and what's the best solution for them. But I will say this, I'm sure the answer to that question would be shocking for people.
Yeah, that's kind of my expectation too. We work with the EDPA from a marketing advisor standpoint.
Oh, that's awesome.
And there's a company that's kind of trying to work through that too. And it's a really sticky space, right? Because you've got you've got these people that don't have access to money or have this really strong distrust of financial institutions. And then on top of that, you've got these enormously ridiculous rates. It's like the people that don't have access to credit, the only way they can get it is by paying just an obscene percentage on whatever they're borrowing money for, which obviously is just, it's sort of piling bad on bad for them. And so it's trying to solve for that it's a tough thing. And like you said, I think that number is probably a bit scarier than we think it is when you think about the percentage of the population that fall into that.
I completely agree. And then I don't know if I have I might have to think about the technology for me personally. I think personally, I probably spend more time thinking about technology for the kids, like what's good technology that's really
I do it for the kids. It's all for the kids.
not wrong. But just that they're spending when they're spending time on their devices, I want them to do things that are interesting to them. And I think there's this added pressure of like, mom, you're an app developer. What should I use for this? So finding things that I think are interesting for them that they'll have get educational qualities out of and not just zombies over Thanksgiving or whatever the case may be. And so that can be challenging. It's like but it really that comes back to content. Who's putting out good content? What's a good platform for that to be delivered through? So I'd probably spend more time thinking about what's technology that's helpful for the kids. I get a million ads for like the smart basketball or the smart soccer ball that's like track your child's progress. Yeah.
Dribble up. Yeah, let me just save you the time. They don't use it.
Just mark that one off the list.
Just cross it off the list. It's great if they use it, but they don't. Not unless you set it up for them and make them do it. That's fun. I don't have an answer for the technology thing either. Of what about you, Emily? You got any good?
I think very similar to what Taylor was saying about like improving the financial integration specifically for the underbanked population. I'm going to have to bring it back to AI because I don't know how to do it otherwise. But I am very interested and hopeful that the AI innovation and just tech innovation in general is going to provide us as developers with some really interesting ways of engaging markets who don't have great access to technology. That I'd love to see that gap close between those who have access and those who don't by improving the tools and almost, I'm going to say, limiting the interface and removing steps from technical processes that allows users to accomplish things through applications faster and easier than they have before, that doesn't require a, a digital native type understanding of how the technology works. Um, the idea of maybe using natural language processing to allow users to accomplish actions rather than saying, well, I need you to click this button, and then I need you to click this button, and then I need you to click this button. Providing those interfaces in what we would consider unconventional ways may make technology much more accessible to those who aren't naturally drawn toward it.
I think that's kind of interesting. I started thinking about if AI could bring like real-time data points into, because I think the biggest problem with lower income is that it's an average, right? That your rate is based off of the average of actions for people in your situation. It's not based off of you specifically and the things you've done. And so maybe AI can bring more data into it to give you a more personalized rate as opposed to something that's based off of one simple thing or one mistake or one hospital bill, which is typically the way the rates are chosen for people, unfortunately. So yeah, I think there's opportunities in there that it can be more personalized for where someone is in their life and circumstances, and maybe doing a better job of the expectation that they're going to pay back the money they borrow.
I
Yeah,
think that's a good opportunity for AI in general. And what I mean by that is often anytime that you have a lot of user generated data, like you just have a lot of data entry, and then you have a very large database that's very important and being used to make important decisions. Like we've heard some be really hesitant, like, I really don't want to use AI to do this. And then we start diving into the data and we're like, there's so many user errors in here that kind of making sure that you have it goes back to like, what are you feeding it? Like having clean coming into it to make those decisions, to analyze that creates a completely different situation, regardless of who's analyzing it. And so just making sure that you have clean data going into it and that you're processing and coming out to it is,
We talked about the garbage in, garbage out, version of that before. I do think I'll be curious what bias AI brings into decision making too, because it'll have some sort of a bias, but it's just bias from a different place.
absolutely. Every model is going to be trained with some inherent bias. We can't get away from it because humans do the training.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So with all this, I mean, what's next? I know we talked about technology being a big dictator of what's going to happen for you guys moving forward. I love the, I mean, I kind of love the idea that you're really, I don't know if you position it this way, but it feels like you're more of a planning company, and you're tailored. I know you might have said it 100 times, but nobody else has heard it, and it is a perfect analogy, which is like, here's this piece of land. I need to know how much this is going to cost, and you're like, where do you want to start? And we did the same thing. Like we went to go do our house in 2016, and we got 5 different bids, that were vastly different. It wasn't even like a little bit different. They were way different from each other. And so I get that. So do you feel like you're more of a planning and I can't think of the right word I'm looking for, but essentially like making sure that people organize their project in a way that gets them the outcome that's as close to their expectations as it could be, more so than just people go like, hey, the nerds over at Motion Mobs are going to dial up some code for me, and I'm just going to start filling up my bank account.
to Emily's credit, when Emily joined Motion Moms, and Emily and I have been working together around 10 years now. And when Emily joined Motion Mobs, she was quickly came to the same conclusion you just was like, okay, how are we positioning this separately? So even though we have a small company and a small team, we still very much think of it as the planning and the strategy side and then the production side. And so we do, I mean, obviously the production side and our software developers and designers spend an enormous amount of time on these products, and that's a substantial amount of what we do. But we really want to make sure that it's the right fit both ways. Like a project is not going to be enjoyable or successful if everyone's not on the same page going into it. So, if you just have this, here's a one-page scope of work for this very expensive project. Good luck. Hope it works out in the end. It's just not going to work well, regardless of who that company works with. There's just not, or at least in my opinion, there's just not a path to be successful unless you're really laying out why you're making those decisions. And often the decisions that we make throughout that process will give the choices back to the business. Like there may be a particular reason that we say we strongly recommend you select this, and here's the reason we're making that recommendation. But there are other times that we say, hey, there's 3 different choices. They look all very comparable to us. We can implement any of these. There may be a business decision to use one instead of the other. And so, yeah, I think that planning, that strategic planning for us is a very important part of our business. and really in its current form and in its future forms, or to Emily's credit, because she really put together our packages for that part of our business and has ran sorry, and has ran those.
I would tack on to what Taylor was saying about strategy. I do think that it's actually very crucial to the future of motion mobs as well, because with these developments in AI, with the vast number of really, really great developers that are in Birmingham, that are in all of these other cities, I think we're actually starting to see a lot more realization from a variety of companies who are not tech companies saying, we need strategy. They have some in house people who do development, but they don't really know what they're doing with them. And instead of having this organized strategic plan to say, here's how we're going to handle rolling out even our internal products, they just throw things to that team when they become on fire and it's not working for them. And so the consulting side of our business is looking to support even companies who don't say, hey, Motion Mobs, I've got this brand new product that needs to be built. Will you handle the whole thing? It's much more strategic in nature, where they're realizing we just need somebody to help us stay on the right path. We don't know what steps 3, 4, and 5 look like. We stopped planning after step 2. And you have to look down the road. Otherwise, you're going to continue wasting time, wasting money, making people mad. And so it's really fun to be able to engage with clients from that perspective as well, when they realize we need to start looking to the future and how do we handle this long term rather than just a knee jerk reaction.
Where they're just fixing symptoms and not looking at actual long-term problems. Yep. No, I think that's awesome. And I think that holds true, right, for all types of businesses. And certainly, and we talked about it in this conversation, as fast as everything is changing, if you're not thinking a little bit farther ahead than, next
Exactly.
quarter, you can probably be in some trouble.
Mm-hmm.